Thanks very much. This is joint work with Andre Blais, Peter Loewen, Elisabeth Gidengil, and Laura Stephenson. Four of us are here. Peter's not. This is a paper on strategic voting, and in particular an experiment where we provide people with information about the relative standing of candidates in their districts in a Canadian election. So the sort of motivation for this is looking at questions of, or sort of puzzles in the literature of why strategic voting or strategically deserting your most preferred candidate or party is relatively rare in first-past-the-post systems. So one sort of intuitive or perhaps obvious answer to that question is, well, maybe lots of supporters of these parties, of weak parties, engage in wishful thinking, right? You can think of voters who are strong supporters of a particular party that has no chance, overestimating the chances that that party is going to do well or that that candidate is going to do well in a district. And so the experiment, the study that we've implemented here and report the findings from, basically tweaks that a little bit by informing voters about the non-viability of their most preferred candidate or party, and seeing if that affects their probability of deserting that most preferred candidate, in other words, casting a strategic ballot. So the context of this is the Canadian election in 2015, in October 18th, and there was, the reason why this election is particularly nice for this type of study is that it was a very competitive election, and there was a lot of intense discussion in the media and among pundits and so on about strategic voting. There were sort of anybody but Harper, so Harper was the incumbent prime minister, anybody but Harper sort of movement on the center-left among the two center-left parties, the New Democratic Party and the Liberal Party. Right, so there's a lot of talk about this. There were lawn signs, it's time to vote strategically. We have to coordinate. We have to get this guy out. All right, there were websites that provided lots of information to voters, showing them how past attempts at removing this center-right or maybe right incumbent hadn't worked, and how the kind of math of this suggested that we have to coordinate and vote strategically. So the study, again, was in the 2015 Canadian election. It was a highly competitive, very interesting, to people like us, election. It was a very long campaign, the longest. So I say this in a room full of possibly Americans who the 2016 campaign started in 1845 or something, right? By Canadian standards, this was the longest campaign in modern history. And lots of talk about strategic voting. So this is the evolution of vote intention in the survey that we're using. So you can see it was for a long time a three-way race. And then the red line, which is the Liberal Party, and the orange line, which is the New Democratic Party, the two parties on the center-left, completely diverged. Leading to a pretty strong Liberal majority. And there's been lots of speculation afterwards about the sort of over-coordination toward the Liberals on the center-left. I don't know about lots of speculation. Peter and I have a paper about this, so that if that qualifies as a lot of speculation, I don't know. This is the evolution of people's estimation of the chances that each of these parties will win the most seats, and you can see how this also changes and then all of a sudden completely diverges, much like vote intention did. So this is a nice context in which to study this type of questioning. So the data we use come from a very large election study. We were in the field, not from the first day of the campaign, but relatively soon afterwards. We were in the campaign for 54 days. We had over 37,000 respondents in this survey, sampling every day. Every 3 days, the sampling strategy was set up to have a nationally representative sample, around 700 on average per day. Toward the end, it was actually many more than that per day. We sort of ramped it up. So lots of very good data. Lots of questions in this survey. And we'll be releasing a kind of public use version of this at some point relatively soon. So standard vote choice questions, party ID questions, leader and party ratings, lots of questions about issues and their salience, and then a post-election study with about 15,000 respondents. So that's the data that we're working with. The experiment itself consisted of selecting respondents whose preferred party was third or worse in the district at the time when they were surveyed. We had just over 5,000 subjects in the experiment, and 3 experimental conditions. What we're calling a local condition, where subjects were exposed to information about the local standings on that day in the district, in the riding, in Canadian nomenclature, of the different candidates. So that's one treatment condition. The second treatment condition does the same thing, but exposing people about information about the relative standings at the national level. And then a control condition that received no information. The source of the treatment comes from a poll aggregator, 308.com, which is sort of standard poll aggregator who partners with the CBC, the Canadian Public Broadcaster, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. And so we partnered with them, and they provided us daily or every 3 days, I guess it was, with information about the polls, the aggregation of the polls in every riding in every district in the country, which we then used as treatments on a daily basis for our subjects in this study. So the experiment basically proceeded. We elicited initial vote intention from these people. And then at some point later in the survey, they were exposed to one of these treatment conditions or the control condition. We asked them about how much confidence they had in these 308.com estimates. There were 2 unrelated modules after that, so some time took place. And then the final question in the survey was, all in all, what are the chances that you will vote for the following parties? And then each party, and it was a scale from 1, no chance at all, to 10, absolutely certain. We generate 2 dependent variables, or study two dependent variables. One that comes from this sample of 5,000 people who were in the main battery of the survey, where we're interested in basically how likely are they to desert their most preferred party when exposed to this information. And the second one is a slightly more behavioral, though I hesitate to really call it behavioral since it's still a survey measure. We ask people in the post-election study, of course, what party they voted for, and then look at, was that a strategic vote? Okay, no problem. Spoiler alert, what I'm going to tell you is that there are null findings. But these null findings are robust to lots of different controls and tests. All right, so there's obviously a difference between evidence of no effects and no evidence of effects. Okay, we're saying this is a real null finding. Right. So this is the distribution of the dependent variables. Sort of shows that there's no difference between these conditions at the mean. And then we can put this into a regression framework. Here I'm only showing you these are the estimates from very basic models with just socio-demographic controls. I could have shown you very large tables with other robustness checks, but the p-values look like this. So there's no effect from giving people information, the sort of best available information on the day about the non-viability of their preferred candidate. Right? We're telling people your candidate, your most preferred candidate, has no chance of winning, and then measuring if they're adjust their behavior, and they don't. So the null findings are robust to lots of controls. We can rule out that people who are more interested in politics are more or less likely to do this. We can rule out the effect of optimism about the chances of their preferred candidate winning. Right? Some people are more or less wishful thinkers, and very importantly, we can rule out the effect of the time in the campaign that this is happening, because this might be confounded by the day on which people are doing this, because there is a real world of events happening out there. But there is absolutely no conditioning that comes from the survey data. So, why is this happening? And I know I only have about 1 minute left. We have sort of 5 discussion points that we think may be going on here. First is that this is a very thin slice of information. I only have 20 seconds, so I'm just going to read them or tell you. The other might be that there are signals that people get from social networks that they're embedded in, and that this is what makes them vote strategically, not this type of information, right? They might just be getting signals from the people they're talking to at the coffee shop instead of paying attention to polls, right? It might be that the type of data that we provided them with, the type of information, simply is stuff that people don't react to. Maybe they are more reactive to qualitative forms of data on the chances of their parties winning. It might be that the people who were selected in our sample had already, in their initial vote choice, decided to vote strategically, and that this is then reflected, and so there's a selection problem going on. We don't think that this is. We think that some of this might be going on, though that it's not fatal. One is the day of there's no effect of when in the campaign this is being measured. And the second is that there are relatively few people in this study who say that they're absolutely certain to vote for their most preferred candidate. Right? There's about 18% of people who say that they're absolutely certain. So, there may be some. There is, I think, room for movement there. And yet, there isn't any movement. And the third is that people may just have not paid attention to this. And we have some checks for this, and we think that that's not a particularly big problem. So, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.